Depression. I found that with depression, one of the most important things you could realize is that you're not alone. You say you're depressed. All I see is resilience. You're allowed to feel messed up and inside out. It doesn't mean you're defective, it just means you're human. Try to understand the blackness, lethargy, hopelessness, and loneliness they're going through. Be there for them when they come through the other side. It's hard to be a friend to someone who's depressed, but it is one of the kindest, noblest, and best things you will ever do. People who have never dealt with depression think it's just being sad or being in a bad mood. That's not what depression is for me. It's falling into a state of grayness and numbness. I go through a lot of depression, and I know other people do too, but I have an outlet that so many people don't. If you have that inside of you and can't get it out, what do? A big part of depression is feeling really lonely, even if you're in a room full of 1 million people. When you're surrounded by all these people, it can be lonelier than when you're by yourself. You can be in a huge crowd, but if you don't feel like you can trust anyone or talk to anybody, you feel like you're really alone. Mental pain is less dramatic than physical pain, but it is more common and also more hard to bear. The frequent attempt to conceal mental pain increases the burden. It is easier to say, "My tooth is aching," than to say, "My heart is broken." Depression for me has been a couple of different things, but the first time I felt it, I felt helpless, hopeless, and things I had never felt before. I lost myself and my will to live. That's the thing about depression. A human being can survive almost anything as long as she sees the end in sight. But depression is so insidious, and it compounds daily, that it's impossible to ever see the end. I am bent, but not broken. I am scarred, but not disfigured. I am sad, but not hopeless. I am tired, but not powerless. I am angry, but not bitter. I am depressed, but not giving up. I'll never forget how the depression and loneliness felt good and bad at the same time. Still does. I have depression, but I prefer to say I battle depression instead of I suffer with it, because depression hits, but I hit back. Battle on. Depression is being colorblind and constantly told how colorful the world is. It is very hard to explain to people who have never known serious depression or anxiety the sheer continuous intensity of it. There is no off switch. There is no point treating a depressed person as though she were just feeling sad, saying, "There now, hang on, you'll get over it." Sadness is more or less like a head cold. With patience, it passes. Depression is like cancer. Mental illness is so much more complicated than any pill that any mortal could invent. Depression, suffering, and anger are all part of being human. Every man has his secret sorrows which the world knows not, and oftentimes we call a man cold when he is only sad. There are wounds that never show on the body that are deeper and more hurtful than anything that bleeds. I couldn't be with people, and I didn't want to be alone. Suddenly my perspective whooshed, and I was far out in space, watching the world. I could see millions and millions of people, all slotted into their lives. Then I could see me. I'd lost my place in the universe. It had closed up, and there was nowhere for me to be. I was more lost than I had known it was possible for any human being to be. I didn't want my picture taken because I was going to cry. I didn't know why I was going to cry, but I knew that if anybody spoke to me or looked at me too closely, the tears would fly out of my eyes and the sobs would fly out of my throat, and I'd cry for a week. I could feel the tears brimming and sloshing in me like water in a glass that is unsteady and too full. Depression presents itself as a realism regarding the rottenness of the world in general and the rottenness of your life in particular. But the realism is merely a mask for depression's actual essence, which is an overwhelming estrangement from humanity. The more persuaded you are of your unique access to the rottenness, the more afraid you become of engaging with the world. And the less you engage with the world, the more perfidiously happy-faced the rest of humanity seems for continuing to engage with it. When people don't know exactly what depression is, they can be judgmental. It is important not to suppress your feelings altogether when you are depressed. It is equally important to avoid terrible arguments or expressions of outrage. You should steer clear of emotionally damaging behavior. People forgive, but it is best not to stir things up to the point at which forgiveness is required. When you are depressed, you need the love of other people, and yet depression fosters actions that destroy that love. Depressed people often stick pins into their own life rafts. The conscious mind can intervene. One is not helpless. Depression on my left, loneliness on my right. They don't need to show me their badges. I know these guys very well. Maybe we all have darkness inside of us, and some of us are better at dealing with it than others. Sometimes I just think depression's one way of coping with the world. Like, some people get drunk, some people do drugs, some people get depressed. Because there's so much stuff out there that you have to do something to deal with it. Listen to the people who love you. Believe that they are worth living for even when you don't believe it. Seek out the memories depression takes away and project them into the future. Be brave, be strong, take your pills. Exercise because it's good for you, even if every step weighs 1,000 pounds. Eat when food itself disgusts you. Reason with yourself when you have lost your reason. That is all I want in life, for this pain to seem purposeful